Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joel Simmons, and this is the Earthworks Podcast. And today I'm very happy to have as my guest Steve Fackler from Serrano Country Club. And Steve, I think I've known you for, I don't even know how long, 20 years, 30 years, a long time, mid-90s probably.
Yeah, it's probably been 25 years. I remember being at my last course, and I got first introduced to your products and your company back early on then. And so that was back in like 98, 99.
Wow. We were much younger men then, weren't we?
Much younger.
Probably much better looking too, I'm sure. So Serrano is in Sacramento, California, which is not the easiest place in the world to grow grass. For those who don't know your marketplace and your environment, talk a little bit about what the environment is like day to day in growing grass in the Sacramento Valley of California.
You bet. Sacramento is kind of in the valley, or the San Joaquin Valley, Sacramento Valley, where it's really noted for agriculture, very fine soils down in the valley. We happen to be at about 1,000 feet. And so for us, we're more kind of in the rock and alluvial stuff that's coming down from the Sierra Nevadas. And so we're east of Sacramento, about 35 miles. And for us, we have some topsoil, but mostly there's a lot of shale and rock underneath the topsoil. So for us, it's not the easiest soils to grow in, and the climate is probably the bigger challenge for us.
Yeah, I would think so, right?
Yeah, we've had temperatures down into the teens, and then yet last summer we got up to about 112. So we're trying to grow cool season grasses. We're kind of in a zone where you could grow either the warm season grasses or you can grow cool season grasses. There's just going to be a period of the year where things probably don't look great, whether that's middle of winter or middle of summer.
On either side of the grass, if you're warm season or cool season, you're going to have a transition that's not easy, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so we have a tough time, I got to say, with the cool season grasses in the middle of summer. So you go July and August, those are our tough two periods or months that we go through. We look great in October. We look great in spring. This last winter, we just got absolutely punished with rain, excess rain.
Yeah.
We got over 45 inches of rain this last winter.
Oh, really? Up by you? I didn't realize it was that much.
Yeah. With a 2-day, we had one period where it was 2 days. We got 9 inches of rain in 2 days. So,
oh my gosh.
So to kind of summarize Sacramento, I would say it's very changeable. It's not going to be the same temperature as it was yesterday.
Right.
For example, today it's going to be 88, and on Saturday it's going to be 109. So just in a couple of days, we go from pleasant to punishing pretty quick.
So we're recording this the second week of July. So you have that kind of a swing from 88 to well over 100 in a matter of a few days.
Yeah.
And what are nighttime temperatures typically?
We've been enjoying like 53 and 54. When the heat wave hits, it's going to be more like 72 to 75. So it'll also go up about 20 degrees.
Yeah. You know, one of the reasons why I really wanted to sit down and chat with you is because I've always considered you a soils guy, and you kind of just proven that by your soils dissertation, which I thought was very thorough and kind of explained what you were doing. There's a whole bunch of soils in your area, though, right? You could move 20 minutes down the road and find a whole different soil profile?
You bet. Good question. I built a golf course down right next to Sacramento, which was 30 some miles away. And we did the entire job. And I think I found 1 or 2 rocks on the entire job site.
Really?
This one, all we have to do is go down 4 to 6 inches, and abundant rock for us.
So you're full of rocks up there. So let's talk a little bit about your background. Give me some idea. First of all, let's start at the very beginning. How the heck did you get into this business? I mean, you've got a pretty interesting background, but how did you get into the whole turf side of things? I'm not even sure I know the answer to this.
So I started in the 1970s, along with a lot of other people,
At the
not
age of
knowing
6.
what was going to be happening in the 70s or 80s. So I got a business degree from San Diego State University and went on my own into retail. Never thought one thing about golf other than I played in high school. After retail for about 5 years, it was 1981 and 82 when interest rates were through the roof at 18% with President Carter. And so a couple of friends of mine, we ended up giving up our retail jobs and we went on a road trip around the US for 6 months. We lived out of his Toyota truck, had a camper shell on it. And we drove and we saw 38 states. We were in Canada. We went down into Mexico and we showed up 2 days before Christmas. Back then, no cell phones. So nobody really knew.
Nobody knew where the heck you were.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when times got tough, you guys just took off and went and got going.
And we did miscellaneous jobs all over the place, whether
so you were actually working while you were on the road.
Yeah. So we slept in the truck. So we really had to take kind of piecemeal type jobs, whether it was a restaurant, whether it was out in the fields picking some fruit. We actually worked on a fishing boat for a couple of weeks down in Florida. And as fun and romantic as that all sounds, it was tough. It was still.
I'm sure it was tough. It sounds like a good song, though. You should write this,
It was hard to find places to stay every night and without people thinking that, we were the bad guys. And
exactly.
A lot of campsites, we tried to sneak in as many of them as we could without paying. Some of that worked great, some not so great. But
how old were you at the time? How old were you guys?
Yeah, I was about 25 when we were doing.
So you weren't super young guys, but you were young enough.
Yeah.
So is this leading to how you found golf?
Exactly. So what happened was when I was back at my parents' house, kind of one of those stays after we had gone, we did a lot of rock climbing and mountain climbing up and down the Sierra Nevadas, whether it was up in Yosemite, whether it was local stuff in and around us down in LA. We spent way too many days and nights just sleeping out under the stars and then go rock climbing the next day or the next 2 days or the next 2 weeks. And so I would kind of make my parents' house kind of a stop and I'd come and go. And when I was back at home one time, I found some old friends, old classmates from school. And her husband was actually in the program of studying turfgrass management at Cal Poly Pomona. And so we started talking. He said, just come to a couple of the classes. So I just sat in on classes. I didn't register. I just went to the classes.
There's a pattern working here, Steve. Not paying for your camping sites and all that stuff. I like it.
Very frugal at that time also.
Well said.
So after taking the classes and going with him and kind of meeting with him and talking, he was very instrumental in helping me get into the program. And so
was he working in the business?
What's that?
Was he working in the business when he was going to school?
Yeah, he was actually working at a nursery. He ended up getting a golf course job, but he also helped me get into the nursery business. And I joined him there at where he was working. And after a year or so, and after signing up for the classes and actually dedicating myself to actually something besides business, I started at a golf course working with a superintendent in Southern California. And so many jobs I have worked on, probably 18 different job sites. I did maintenance, I did construction, I did grow in, and again, kind of that nomad kind of life. I was building a course in Mexico, then went to Mississippi, then went to Oregon, and then landed here in Sacramento with my wife, beautiful wife that's super understanding about all this.
Clearly.
And yeah, she'd have to be, for all this. And so we've raised a couple of kids and been in this area for about 27 years.
So when you got to the Sacramento area, where did you land first?
You bet. Here in Sacramento, and we're building 2 courses. The city built a course down south of Sacramento. Then the city of Roseville built one, and I helped them finish it up and then do the grow in. Then I did another grow in up at the last place, which was the Ridge, and that's where I met you. Is when I got up to the Ridge golf course. Since then, I moved on from the Ridge. And I've been at Serrano for 15 years.
I think I met you with Dave Wilbur at the Ridge. Is that most
You bet. It was
possible?
Dave Wilbur and a guy by the name of Paul Cushing, and then another gentleman, Jim Farron, who was doing a grow in at the same time. And it was all about that same time that I was talking to all 3 of them and you as well.
Yeah.
And between the 4 of you, or among all 4 of you, I ended up seeing the light, so to speak, and learning stuff that I didn't learn at Cal Poly. We probably learned it, but not in the same scope as what I did with you.
And you mentioned Jim Farron, and he's another soils guy. I should get Jim on the program one of these days, because I've known Jim for probably as long as I've known you, if not maybe even longer. But so what inspired you? I mean, I know Mr. Wilbur, who we've had on this podcast many times, is Mr. Soils, but what's the light bulb effect? I mean, how did that happen for you? When did you start to realize that if you can manage the soils? And like I said, I consider you a soils guy, so you've got to have a couple stories in there. What was it that said, maybe I should be looking at soils as well?
When I was doing construction, obviously we're moving dirt, we're building the groundwork for a golf course. And after about 5 or 6 of those courses, some grow-ins and things like that, you really start looking at the soils themselves, and not just as a base where you can put some frosting on top of the cake and making it, look pretty, but actually trying to put something together that's going to last longer than just a couple of seasons. And it seemed to me that it was a little bit of a formula for success, looking at the soils versus just looking at what can I do to green up the turf today. And so that was kind of the light bulb moment, was when I could actually start seeing that we're putting something together for the long term.
Now, was this coming from another superintendent? Was it coming from Dave? What was it that hey, somebody said something to me, or maybe I should be looking at? So it's often difficult. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, as everybody knows, and and sometimes it's really difficult to get to that point where you can kind of let go and realize that getting your soils right makes a big difference. And it's interesting how I still fight that with certain folks across the country, but even at this point in time. But was there a particular person that inspired you, or had been doing some work that made sense?
I gotta say, it was all 3 of those guys within a very short period of time. I was talking with Paul, who I had gone to college with, and we actually worked together at one of the golf courses while we were in school. And he came in and asked me, what's your calcium magnesium ratios? And I looked at him and I said, I don't know, I'll have to look it up. And he said, Steve, you got to know this stuff. And it really kind of flipped on the light switch of, what do I know about my soils? Do I know them well enough to be able to purchase, $20,000 worth of fertilizer and make that a quote economical or a valid application? Was it the right product? And not saying that the products that we look at are not valuable, whatever kind they are, especially here in the Sacramento Valley. We have more fertilizers than anywhere else in the world. Yeah, we have more
Your
fertilizer
agriculture.
vendors and choices,
Yeah.
and it's just a really an open kind of marketplace for us, where if you have a need, there's somebody selling something to
Right.
you or
Well,
for you.
even if you don't have a need, there's somebody selling you something that you might be able to use. Let me ask you this: either at the Ridge or at Serrano, have you needed to apply limestone to those soils?
Yeah, yeah. The ridge where I was before this job, um, uh, very similar in elevation,
Right.
and the red clay soils that
Yep.
we had up there. And so, yeah, we did. Luckily, we had more than a year for the grow in, and so we were able to put down lots and lots of calcium. We were low in calcium,
Were you
and
high in magnesium?
yeah,
So the
magnesium off
soil,
the
the soil was a
charts.
little sticky and gooey, and it would stick to your shoe and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Whenever it got wet, it was miserable to walk
Right.
on,
And it
no
would
stuff.
dry out to be an adobe brick.
Yeah, we had a brick factory out in the back of the maintenance shop,
Right. Exactly.
and
How long did it take you to get that situation, rectified? I mean, how long did it
yeah,
take you to get enough calcium in there to kind of balance that out?
yeah, so we were using 200 tons in the spring. We were using a little bit in the summer. We were going 200 more tons in the fall. And so it took us the better part of about 3 to 4 years before
Yeah.
we started seeing the ratio actually, go from this to this, where it's flipped over the
Were,
magnesium.
were you
So
actually higher in magnesium percentage than calcium?
yeah, we
Wow.
sure were.
Did you
It was
know
a
that when you got to the Ridge? Did you have any inkling as to what the soil looked like when you took that job?
Not at all, because I had been working down in the valley, and
You thought
we
it was
had seen
completely
such
different.
gosh, the soils down in the valley is alluvial plains. It had been the stuff that had washed off the mountains for millions of years, and there was organics in it. And it was beautiful soil. Then when I went to another course, it was a little bit worse of soils. And then when I got to the ridge, I found out at the wrong time. I had already said, yes, I'll do this job, and found out the soils were pretty tough.
That's an interesting. I was going to ask you that, and you answered it. But let me ask you this as a piece of advice for somebody coming in: what would you've done different? Would you have actually asked for soil reports, or would you have taken a probe with you? I mean, would you have maybe not even taken the job if you had known the extent to which that soil profile was imbalanced?
Absolutely. Yeah, it took a lot of hours and a lot of manpower and a lot of money to change that. And not that I would have said no to the job, but
Yeah.
I think that if you know what you're getting into, I think it makes it just a little bit better of a scenario where you say, okay, I know what I'm getting into when I walk in the door.
Yeah. And of course, still to this day, that a lot of criticism comes this way. I mean, this whole idea of adding calcium is still criticized heavily by academia in our country. And then I talked to somebody like you who spent 2 or 3 years, and it can take 2 or 3 years. I mean, that's one of the problems with calcium. I mean, it's, I walk into, Steve Fackler's office and say, hey, Steve, we can fix this in 2 or 3 years. It's not a good sales pitch. I mean, it's not an easy conversation to have, it to say, hey, yeah, we can get this fixed in 3 years. First thing that usually happens is you get kicked out the door, but you actually lived this and saw the change. So in that third, fourth year, what were you starting to see as that calcium was starting to take hold? What did it look like to you as the superintendent?
Yeah, prior to that, the first couple of years, it seemed like you would see the seasonality of the grass when it would struggle in the middle of summer, and it would struggle again in the middle of winter when it was just saturated soils.
Yeah, couldn't
And so
drain.
what we saw was, as we went through the program, it got easier in the summer and it got easier in the winter when things were wet, because we started seeing water percolate through the profiles. In the summer, we felt that We didn't have to put on as much water. It would retain water,
Yeah.
and it felt like it was feeding itself. We would put down some products, and we didn't have to be on a cycle of every, whatever it was, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12, 14, whatever the fertilizer choices you made. It felt like those kind of evened out. So like a
Work
roller
better.
coaster, it wasn't that huge up and down and
Yeah.
high up and down. It would ended up being kind of a nice kind of ride where you didn't go up to the peak and down to the valley kind of thing.
So the fertilizer started to work better, last longer. You got better drainage. So you weren't, when it did rain in your winter months, you weren't just saturated for the entire time, right? Those kind of things
I
were
would say,
changing.
yeah, quite a bit.
How about rooting? What were you seeing with rooting?
Yeah, the typical rooting that you get on a golf course, especially when they're new courses, is you see the roots drive real hard at first. And
Yeah.
we had quite a long grow in of over a year. And so we were able to push those roots down pretty far. What we saw though is we had as we had more play and we had people on the turf, roots were not going as deep. And so for us, it was the balance of fertilizer and the amendments to change that ratio. And then we started seeing where the roots started growing better
Yeah.
as we went through
Yeah.
that. So it was good at first, then it kind of beat us up a little bit.
Yep.
And then as we went through the next couple of years, it really improved. And I still talk to the superintendent at that job site, and he's chosen some other things now. But I got to say that the choices are probably okay because the balance is there.
Right.
And
Right.
so I know he still hits him with some of the stuff, but I felt like the groundwork that we laid for him has made it easier for him.
That's an interesting point. I've been through that a number of times where you come in and you've gone through these years of investing in the soil and changing the soil, literally physically changing the soil. And then the next guy coming in, it's a different philosophy. And I tell this story often. I had a client that I went in and I explained to him that we just did pretty much what you just described, 2 or 3 years of liming and balancing the soil and getting some carbon in there and opening it up and changing it, literally changing it physically. And, he kind of poo-pooed me. And then finally, like 6 months later, and I was convinced I'd never hear from him again, he called me back and said, hey, can you come out here and tell me what you guys were doing again? Because I haven't fertilized yet. I've been so busy. And I'm like, well, I kind of told you that's, but it's, when you follow somebody like your work, it's a lot easier, but that soil can revert backwards if it's not managed properly. Because managing calcium magnesium is not natural; it's forced because we're pushing the calcium in where the magnesium is really the stronghold. And if you let that dissipate over years, it will start to revert back. And hopefully, that's not the case in your scenario with that other gentleman.
No, I don't think it's
Good.
I don't think it's reverting back. I don't know his whole program. We don't really talk too much about it, but I would say for the 10 years that I was there, I felt like at the end of 10 years that I had built soils versus depleting soils.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing I took with me is I felt like I did some good for that golf course for the long run, not just the short term.
I have a picture in one of my slide sets from a course not far from where you are, and I pulled the probe out, and it was the fairway, and it was clay, and I literally rolled the soil in my hand and made a ball out of it. I stuck it on the truck, and I drove around your area 100 and some degrees. It turned into what looked like a rock. And I mean, that's how bad it was, that heavy clay soil. And this gentleman was trying to fix this with gypsum, and it just wasn't going to work because it's just not strong enough, not enough calcium. Finally, he was able to discover that the limestone was the solution to fixing that. And I've gone back since then. Now, a couple of years later, like you said, and I think this is a really important point, is that none of these changes happen immediately. It's a long-term commitment and an investment, and it's not an overly expensive one, quite honestly. But I I went back a number of years later and I put my probe in that soil and it went almost down to the handle. And I would take that soil and it would crumble like a beautiful chocolate cake. There was, the clay had been, kind of shifted out and balanced. There was a lot more carbon, organic matter in there. But it really shows to what you guys have gone through in that marketplace, how you can make these changes. Would you consider that what you did with all that lime to be a very expensive investment?
That's a great question. Back in the early 2000s, things were much, much cheaper as
Well,
far as
true.
those kind of ag products.
Yeah.
And we were kind of the guys that first on the West Coast. I know you'd done more work on the East Coast, but I got to say, the guys on the West Coast, we didn't hear that message probably as early.
Yeah.
And so for us, when we first started getting into it, the calcium was just dirt cheap. I got to say, it was ridiculously cheap. And so for us, it was just a matter of getting the trucking and then getting the application of getting it out on the golf course.
Yeah, a lot of time, a lot of energy. But, even relatively speaking now, even though it's obviously a lot more pound per pound that you paid, it's still one of the best investments in the scenario that you're describing. Now, obviously, neither you or I are advocating to go out there and blast the property with limestone. That's just totally inappropriate in a lot of situations. But when you have a scenario like you had, and I remember talking to you at length about the ridge, this calcium magnesium imbalance, even though we still get tremendous criticism, and it's, all calcium is designed for is raising the pH. What, in this case, magnesium was pushing the pH. So what we did was actually pushed the magnesium out and the pH stabilized or oftentimes even lowered. And I think in your case, it actually lowered it, didn't it?
Yeah, it sure did. Yeah.
That's heresy, Steve. You're going to get a lot of criticism for this now. You're going to be on my bandwagon. But yeah, I can't tell you how many times in my career that I've worked with superintendents and we've actually limed the property and lowered the pH based on what the soil chemistry told us when we ran our initial batteries of soil tests. And that's exactly what you were seeing. And I remember seeing your early soil tests with Dave and talking about that. And it seemed pretty straightforward, but I didn't realize it took you 3 to 4 years, but that's the challenge,
Yeah. And the land prior to it being a golf course was, they were feeding cattle, just grazing out on the hillside. And so, to have a plan of how were we going to amend those to grow grass and grow really good grass, it was nice to have a plan, and it was nice to know the numbers. And I got to say, it was a great blueprint for me. I'd, done a zillion golf course holes, of building them off of blueprints. And so when I got to the grow in, I had another kind of blueprint. And I got to say, for a guy like me, it made a lot of sense.
Yeah. So what was the amendment pack? What were you kind of doing when you're doing the grow-ins? Obviously you were liming. And I assume both Ridge and Serrano are sand-based greens, correct?
Yes, they're all
USGA spec?
The USGA spec, not the California. Good. But for us, it was heavily with the organics of whatever kind you had, whether it was chicken manure. We tried a number of different things, grape stems. We tried.
I remember that.
Yeah, some poultry products, some beef products, you name it. We were trying lots of different things. And so,
but you were amending and you were trying to get, the concept was that you were trying to get microbial foodstuffs in there.
Exactly.
Something to feed the bugs.
Yeah, and so we were feeding the soil, and that was the whole mantra at the time. And that's what we went with, was if we needed calcium, we threw that. If we needed some potassium, we threw that. But ideally, we were trying to get rid of the magnesium. The bottom line was just magnesium was the devil for us.
Right.
So we were trying to get out the devil. So
yeah. And when you have that level of magnesium, it really is the devil. It's, you can feel it when you walk on it. It sticks to your shoe. It rolls up like literally, like I said, that one sample where I just rolled that ball out of the probe. It was this, hard as it was a rock. Everybody thought it was a rock that I was passing around. But that's what magnesium will do. I mean, it's Adobe. Think about it. You're trying to grow grass through this stuff, and in 100 and some degree weather in July and August. I mean, that's got to be outrageously difficult without going down the right path and getting the soil part of it.
Yeah, not too far from us is a pottery maker. They
Yeah.
have their soils here local, and they make pottery, for gosh sakes, So it's got
That
to
may
tell you
be
how.
that may be the indicator that you look for when you go look for a job. Are there a lot of pottery makers around here? Because if there are, I don't want this job. The soil sucks.
Yeah, it was ironic when we kind of saw that and said, well, 2 and 2 equals 5, it's
Yeah,
there's the
exactly.
pottery over there.
That's
So
funny. Let me ask you this. You have a business degree. How much did that help you in your golf career?
um that's a great question. Since I didn't get into the business side of it, being a general manager or
Right.
being with maybe a management company, I can't say that it really enhanced my career, but it definitely made me a better superintendent. And I was able to do the business part of it fairly easily because I'd spend so much time learning how
Right.
to run businesses. And so for us, uh, both at the Ridge and where I'm at here at Serrano, the business side of it comes pretty easily for me. And so it was just because I went to school for it, and that's
Yeah.
what made it easy. I'm not the sharpest guy in the world, so
None of
but
us
it
are.
but it helped me be able to balance the books, so to speak,
Yeah.
every month. Mhm.
So let me ask you this. You've been in this business for a long time. What's the biggest changes that you've seen in all these years in the golf course industry?
Um, that's a great question.
There's
Over
probably a lot of them, but I'm sure you have a couple ideas.
Yeah, you see so much. Number one, I would say the equipment is just
Yeah.
phenomenal now. Of what we used to use back then was really farming equipment,
Yeah.
and we didn't have tons and tons of specialized machines. Now we have a specialized machine for the roughs, for the fairways, to aerify, you name it. We have a tool or a piece of equipment for that. And it's hard for me to say, that, yeah, we're looking at $120,000 for a mower or a
Yeah.
couple of mowers. I would have never believed that had you said to me that 30 years ago
Yeah.
that
Steve,
you'd be
by
paying 120 for a
2023, you'll
fairway unit.
spend $200,000 for a fairway mower.
Yeah, yeah. And obviously the precise nature now of how we can put down fertilizers, chemicals,
Yeah.
on, we can do to the square inch. I mean, we can, with GPS, the amount of precision in our business is amazing now. The money that we spend is also pretty amazing to
Yeah.
me as far as how much we spend. You even have kind of a local neighborhood kind of golf course. These guys are spending $1 million on those. Back 35 years ago, that was,
Unheard of.
something for the country
Yeah.
clubs.
Yeah, exactly.
And I gotta say, the people that are in the business now, most of them have college educations, or they're able to
Yeah.
take college courses. Even if they didn't go to college, they can do it through um, the continuing education online, or they can do it through some of the meetings that the vendors hold.
Yeah.
And so it seems to me that you talk to guys and they have a better concept of, the whole picture of soils and, whatever it takes to grow grass, the guys seem to have a better
Yeah.
grasp of that.
We still get the question though, what's new? What's new? What's new? It's kind of one of my pet peeves. What's the
Yeah.
single most important piece of equipment invention in your career? What would you say is the most valuable tool from a equipment standpoint that you've seen come across the desk over these years?
I got to say that there's two of them. One would be the sprayers and our ability
Yeah.
to spray, precise amounts. And then second would be aerifiers. They got some phenomenal
Yeah.
aerifiers that can
Big
modify,
change.
and it gets you a pathway to changing the soils.
Yeah.
And so it's not just the physical, okay, I pulled a plug, but it's an avenue for us to actually put stuff into the soil a little bit easier.
Right.
So
So what's
without,
your
I don't know how
current
to do it.
aerification strategy? I mean, what are you doing these days?
Yeah, so we're using obviously the smaller tines in the fall. We're following right behind that with some kind of additives. We've got spikers, we've got the groomers, we had all the things that can actually open up soils. And we're going with the bigger tines in the spring. We actually hit them with the shark teeth, the slicers, the Planet Air. Don't mean to plug one company
That's
over
okay.
another, but
That's a good tool.
Planet Air. And so for us, it's trying to open up those rock hard soils, to be honest.
I was going to say, with your soils up there, how you doing that in the fairways? You're pretty shallow. I mean, aren't you hitting rock pretty often in an air fire?
Yeah, just last week I was aerifying number 16 fairway, and I thought, my God, there's a lot of rock in here.
Oh,
I didn't remember it being that rocky, but sitting on those aerifiers, and I got to say that's still the one way I can kind of get in touch with our soils. And I just did it just last week after
were
doing
doing it
this for
Friday, I
35
think, right?
years. Yeah,
Yeah.
not bad for an old guy. And I didn't hit any sprinklers. That was the best
Oh, that's a
part
good
of
day.
it.
It's a good
My
day on the air
irrigator
fire when you
loved
don't
me.
break a line.
Don't break a line and don't break a sprinkler head.
Right.
And so for us, I got to say that aerifying, and I wish that I could do it more. I wish I had,
Yeah.
more time and a little bit more ability to do more holes at once, to be honest, do it faster and get the whole place done. And so
I
the
always
club
say,
has come a long way as far as
Yeah.
helping us do that.
as I always say, the most important nutrient in turf management is oxygen, and there you have it, right there. You're really getting in
Absolutely.
there. Talk to me about labor force up in your neighborhood. How easy is that for you guys these days?
So labor has been absolutely phenomenally good for us. We do not have a shortage of
Really?
guys.
You're one of the few guys I've talked to in the country that has actually said that out loud.
Yeah, we have got a great core of guys, and then we have
Good.
some of the seasonal people that come on. And I gotta say, I felt very lucky. We only have to recruit minimally. We don't have to really go beat the bushes for it. And I'll give anybody a chance. And so we'll whip them into shape and, kind of give them the do-how of this is
Right,
how
right.
golf courses are.
Yeah.
But then again, we don't need them for long periods of time. A couple of months, 3-4 months. So I get a lot of college kids, to be honest. And
that works out?
yeah, it's worked out really well. I was teaching at a community college for about 10 years, and I got to say that was a great source of labor as well.
Yes.
I would talk to the kids and give them a shot, there during the summer, and so that helped a bunch.
Yeah, no, I know the feeling. I spent 10 years at Rutgers, and a lot of the guys that were coming through there were looking for people. So it worked out. It was a great networking thing, and that's a lesson to be learned too. Is that networking is still extremely important in our industry, and it's amazing to me that you have you don't have the struggle that a lot of guys have with labor. I mean, probably the biggest single conversation we have is, I just can't find anybody. I'm 40% down, but is that unique, you think, to the Sacramento Valley?
I think so. We were. In the 35 years, I've rarely had an issue with finding guys or ladies. We have some
Yeah.
ladies working
Good,
for us.
as it should be.
Yeah, and like I said, we'll give anybody, a chance if they,
Yeah.
I lay it out, the good, the bad, and the ugly, so they know what they're getting into. But
So
but-
have you had a lot of guys come through, or folks come through that have been moved on into superintendent roles and that started with you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Along the way, I think I had 11 guys that were
Wow.
superintendents that over the years, a couple of them have gotten out of it since then, but
Yeah. The smart
um,
ones.
yeah,
Yeah.
I got them started on the road to being a
Yeah.
superintendent.
That's
And
that's
so,
quite the compliment, Steve, is that when you can produce, and one of the things I've always said to people about you is that you have this wonderful patience, and you know, you would have been the kind of guy, if I was getting into the business, I would want to work under, because of your patience and understanding. But you know, to have 11 guys come through and be successful under your tutelage, that just says an awful lot about any superintendent, and that's got to be a point of pride that you've got to take with you.
oh, thanks. Yeah, yeah, it sure is.
You know, let me ask you this, and I'm going to say this careful because I'm in the same boat. You and I are about the same age. We've been doing this for a long time. Has it changed now that you know, we're the experienced ones? And I mean, is managing the younger generations more of a challenge for you personally? And are there any tricks to handling that generation from coming from a position that you and I are in?
Yeah, that's interesting question because I got kids that are that age, of my
Right. Yeah,
own. And
exactly.
so I've got some of the kids working that are younger than that.
Yeah.
And of course, there's challenges inherent with the business as far as waking up at 4 in the morning,
Yeah.
being out there when it's 112, spot watering.
Right. Exactly.
Those are the biggest challenges. But the personality, if you can spend time with the guys, I feel like spending time and being out there with them means a lot more than any classroom setting where if I
Yeah.
just sit in the office and I tell them something, that's valuable. But being out there and talking to them and with them and showing them, I'm still out there a lot of days, helping them with their jobs, and feel that side by side you can show them, quote, the tricks, of
Yeah.
the business. But it's still always a challenge. But I got to say, it's just the time you put in is what you get out of it.
Yeah.
So
So you're still finding some reward.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, my back not so much, but
No,
yes,
of
there are
course
still
not.
some
Of
rewards.
course not. What do you look for now? I mean, again, I'm trying to help anybody listening. Give us some advice on what you look for when you're vetting somebody to come onto the crew. What kind of questions you're asking? What kind of traits are you looking for? What you know, how do you vet somebody coming into this property and you know, that might join your team?
Yeah, so when somebody comes in, we sit and talk with them about the job, and we kind of lay out what is the job itself. And then I see their response, whether they're rolling their eyes or they're picking up their phone, scrolling through, Instagram. But
Right.
mostly it's interest. Are they interested
Yeah.
in the job, or is it just something for a paycheck?
Yeah.
And granted, there's room for both of those. We don't have to have every single body on property hoping to be an assistant superintendent. It's okay for having people
Yeah.
that just want a 40-hour week job. They don't want the overtime. They don't want, the commitment for I'm going to work every weekend kind of thing. But a few of those are the ones that you look for and you say, okay, maybe I can work with this one and help them along and help them
Yeah.
along. And we've done a number of times where we sent guys, whether it's through the Penn State or the Rutgers program, and helped them along. And financially, we helped them, held their jobs,
Good.
tried to pay them for that, kind of thing. So um, that's probably the most I look for is somebody interested? Do they
Yeah.
like this kind of, format of this is what you'll be doing?
Do you look for people that like the game of golf?
Yeah, yeah, I find quite a few of those. And of course, we let people play golf there at certain
Sure.
times and certain things. But yeah, I'd rather have somebody that knows the game. But I got to say, I got a kid that wants to be a dentist. He doesn't play golf, and he's one of the greatest guys that's on our crew. So
And he wants to be a dentist?
he wants to be a dentist. So
Wow. Isn't that
yeah,
a
he goes
TV
to
show
school for a
from Christmas
while.
time?
What's that?
Isn't that a TV show from Christmas time? Herbie or somebody from the Abominable Snowman. Anyway, go on. I'm
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 just
starting
hoping
to
he can
ramble.
I'm just hoping he can help me when I get to be a little bit older. If I got any
Yeah.
bad
My
teeth, maybe
my
he'll
teeth all fall
remember
out. I
me.
can call him and get a deal.
Yeah, get a deal on a root canal.
Yeah,
So
exactly. So let's talk about that. Like I said, you and I are about the same age. I've been doing this for 35 years. So you have officially basically let the club know that it's time for you to move on. What happens now? I mean, you've done a lot of interesting things. Like I said, you're a soils guy. You've built courses. You've got a business degree. You spent time teaching. I mean, you've got quite the resume, and you're still a young man. I mean, what do you want to do now? I mean, what's your next step?
that's a great question. As I look at the future of what do I truly want, and I think at this point in time, I really want to spend more time with my wife. I got to
Good.
say the life of the superintendent is one of sacrifice.
Yeah.
You sacrifice a lot. You miss birthdays, you miss weddings, you miss a lot of summer vacations.
Yeah.
And I think that at this point in time, I'd love to just spend more time with my wife, whether that's traveling or whether it's just staying around the house. But
Nothing wrong with
for the
that.
most part, I'd love to see my kids a little bit more. I got kids on either, uh, I got one in New York City and one in Seattle. So somehow, some way, I'd like to be
They
more
couldn't
of,
get further apart now for you,
oh
could
my gosh, yeah.
they?
So get my frequent flyer miles
Yeah, exactly.
and go see them. I
L-
just
l-
rode the Five Boroughs bike race
Oh,
with
we were talking
in
about
New
that the other
York.
day. I'm
Yeah,
a veteran of the 5 borough bike ride, and
yeah, we'll have
what a
to
great
do that
experience.
either
Yeah, I'd
next
love to
year
do
or
it
the
again. I haven't done it for a few years now, but it was a great experience, except for the last roll up the Verrazano Bridge. That
Verrazano Bridge.
that was a little struggle, but by the time you got down that hill and the party was starting, it was kind of fun. But yeah, that's a great experience, that little bike ride there. Let me ask you this, Steve. You mentioned you sacrificed a lot. If you were to be starting over your career, do you think you would change some of that lifestyle? Would you take it differently than what you probably did now, knowing what you know, and your desire to be close to home and the kids? I mean, how do you manage that?
I think that's just a personality trait. I think
Yeah.
that to pull that out of me would be hard. Yeah, I think that I would do that for pretty much any job that I would take.
Yeah.
Is work, give it all, and leave nothing on the
Yeah.
table.
No, I
Kind
think
of
that's a
thing.
good, I think that's a very good and honest answer, because I think I'd probably be the same thing. I wouldn't know how to do it any other way. So what do you want to do now? I mean, other than just being home, I mean, I assume you're gonna want to, work. And I was kind of hoping to get you on here so that if somebody hears this, they can call you up and say, hey, I could use you. I mean, short of getting in the in the RV and traveling the country like our friend um there's my mind again.
But I did that already. I've
Oh,
already
you've
done
already done that. That's
it
right. You already
twice.
did your road trip. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that being said, is the hobbies and the things that I like is the mountain climbing, some alpine climbs. We used to do a lot of rock climbing where we'd have to use the ropes and all that. And I'd love to still go do some of that. I still feel like I have the energy in me to go do those. And that
Yeah.
was such a source of pleasure and pain and frustration and yet exhilarance, when you do accomplish something like that. And
Yeah.
so I'm not
It's
sure that just playing golf once a week is going to be that exhilarating, but
probably
it
not.
still
You still
it puts
might do
you
it, but might
it
do
still
other.
puts you with friends, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to always be the adrenaline. It's
Yeah.
so I think the biggest thing though is your question before was what would I do different? I think that I would make more of a plan and stick to a plan instead of kind of letting the job dictate to me what to do and what to be.
Yeah.
So
It's funny. I mean, I talk to a lot of people, obviously, here on the podcast and, my day to day, but, it's good to see people figuring out how to balance the lifestyle, and because you want to see your kids grow up, and you want to spend time with your spouse, and you got to be able to make your life a little bit more comfortable, and it's not an easy thing in our business. I mean, it's either side of the table, it's a lot of work and a lot of time being put into it to get it going. So I don't know if there's a good answer there or not, but are you planning on continuing to work? What do you want to do now that you're so what's your schedule now? You're going to be there until the end of August?
Yeah, I'm going to be leaving September 1st.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, I still feel like I have some years, plenty good years in me.
I think you do.
I still love going to work and doing the work. So until that happens where I don't, I think that I'm going to keep going. Maybe look at, like you said, maybe some of the other professions,
Yeah.
whether it's teaching or don't know. I don't really truly have a big X on the wall and say, here, put my head here. So, yeah.
Any advice for those of us in this age group as golf course superintendents? I mean, it's got to get harder every year you go on. I mean, I'm sure you felt that. Is there any advice that you would share with anybody at, as we're starting to age out in terms of surviving the golf course superintendent's job?
Yeah, I would say don't feel like you have to be there at 5 o'clock every day.
Good.
In the morning. Now it's okay to stay a little bit later, but I gotta say sleeping in has been huge for me.
Yeah.
An hour and a half, and not having to be there at the crack of dawn. So for me, it's been a little bit more of relying on assistants to open up and run things and have that trust of, these guys can do this job for the next few hours. So I would say, travel and take your vacations. I was one that would always work, even though I was sick. I'd never take a sick day, that kind of thing. So
that doesn't happen much anymore, does it? Did you take your birthday off at least? Did you at least stay home on your birthday?
I try not to celebrate my birthdays. It's just one more trip around the sun without falling off.
Oh, they're important. Come on. I think they're very important to celebrate. It's your day.
The only thing that I celebrate is every year I try to ride my age on the bike, and that's been rewarding. Is riding.
And you just did that, not recently.
My age.
There you go. It gets harder every year, though, doesn't it?
Once I'm up there in the 70s and 80s,
yeah, another mile on the bike. That's not easy. Yeah, wait till you're 85, pal. Let's see what happens then.
And probably the best advice if you're going to do bike riding is buy a good saddle, buy a good seat.
Yeah. It's funny, when I did the 5-mile bike ride, the 5-borough bike ride, I rode with a friend's with a friend of mine, and she rode what looked like Annie Mae's bike. It was a single gear, but man, when she would go up those hills, she would blow me away, and I'm like working, and she's like do. So, but she had this huge, really comfortable looking seat on her bike, so it was I think she was quite comfortable with it. But yeah, that would be fun. I think we should talk about that. And when that's always the first week in May. The 5-borough.
Yeah, it was it the Memorial Day weekend or something close to it?
Yeah, it's May sometime. I always thought it was the first weekend, but they may have moved it back. But man, what an experience. I think I told you this the other day, though, as I left, that I came down the parking lot and hit gravel, and some car pulled out in front of me, and after all those miles, I wipe out in the parking lot 5 feet from my car, and I pulled my hamstring so badly that it's still affected. This is years ago now, but yes, I would love to go back and enjoy that experience. It was a lot of fun. So
I'd love that. I'd love it.
Well, Steve, I wish you the very best. I really hope that the next chapter in your book here is a good one. Like I said, if anybody's listening and has some ideas that knows you, that probably would be nice to reach out. You're a good networker. Like I said, you've done some teaching, so that's a skill set that's not easy. I mean, you either have it or you don't have it, to be able to speak in front of a group. So, I could see you going out doing some consulting as well, and talking some soils to people, and you're a good communicator. So hopefully, this isn't you don't just end up on a mountain somewhere climbing every day. I hope you can stay in the business and bring some of that experience. And you've got quite a bit of experience between the business, the grow-ins, being a superintendent for all these years. I'm sure that there is another chapter for you, and I'm grateful that we had a chance to catch up on this podcast before you ended up leaving. And then hopefully, and I think you said this to me the other day, it's like, a lot of guys leave the industry and you just never see them again, so you have my number if you need me, by the way, so feel free to stay in touch.
Well, thanks. I've met so many phenomenal people in this journey of going around, whether it's architects or some of the people that own golf courses, or just the people that are members, or some of the guys that play at a public golf course, and they're still phenomenal people. And I got to say that, I don't think there's too many other things that I would have got this kind of pleasure and reward out of. So
that's nice to hear. That's very nice. Is there a place for people could reach out to you? Do you have an email address that you want to share, that in case somebody's would like to reach out to you?
You bet. It's Steve Fackler 541 at gmail.com.
There you go. Steve Fackler 541 at gmail.com. What's the 541? Is there a significance?
5 minus 4 is 1. That's all I can.
That seems to work. Steve, thank you so much. I wish you the very best of luck. I appreciate you being here with us today. And I'm sure whatever is next for you, it will be enjoyable, and hopefully you do have some time to spend with your lovely wife, and maybe come out to New York. And if you do, let me know. I'm about an hour from the city, so and I have a bunch of bikes here, so if you want to come this way, we can figure that out too. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Joel, for everything.
And that, folks, is the Earthworks podcast. Please be a subscriber, because we will send you information on who our next guest is, like Steve Fackler, and we will keep you informed as to what's going on. And Steve, again, thanks so much for being here today and letting me pick your brain. And again, I will wish you the greatest of success as you move on.
Thank you. Thank you so much.